Ricky Nelson was the original reality star before the term even existed, evolving from a shy child into a genuine teen heartthrob right before America's eyes on the iconic 1950s series The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Fast forward to 1963, and the 23-year-old singer was ready to settle down, tying the knot with 18-year-old Kristen Harmon. This wasn't a quiet backyard ceremony. It was hailed as the absolute wedding of the year, boasting a guest list of 400 that read like a who's who of Hollywood royalty. Together, they built a family that looked picture perfect, welcoming 4 children into the fold: their daughter Tracy, identical twin boys Matthew and Gunnar, and eventually their youngest son Sam. However, the polished image broadcast into millions of living rooms masked a much darker reality. While the Nelsons projected wholesome charm on screen, their private life was rapidly disintegrating behind closed doors. By the time the late 1970s rolled around, Ricky and Kristen's union was in shambles, buckling under the heavy weight of alleged cheating scandals and escalating substance abuse issues. Gunnar later opened up about those chaotic days, recalling how his mother began drinking heavily, leading to explosive, alcohol-fueled screaming matches that left permanent scars on all the children. The inevitable finally happened in 1982, when the couple officially divorced, shattering the long-held illusion of their domestic bliss once and for all. For the kids, who had spent their lives basking in the reflected glory of their legendary parents and grandparents, the breakup meant being dragged into a brutal whirlwind of bitterness and family infighting. But the family's tragedy was far from over. Fate was about to deal them an even more catastrophic hand. On New Year's Eve of 1985, the world was shocked to learn that 45-year-old Ricky Nelson had perished when his aircraft went down, killing him, his fiancée, and members of his band instantly. In the blink of an eye, the Nelson siblings were left fatherless, and an already fractured family dynamic was violently thrown into deeper chaos and grief. The fallout was ugliest for young Sam, who was just 11 years old at the time. He became the rope in a tug-of-war custody battle between his instability-plagued mother Kristen and his maternal uncle, the famous NCIS star Mark Harmon. What should have been private mourning became tabloid fodder. Yet amidst the media circus, each of Ricky's children had to navigate their own difficult journey to adulthood. Their paths diverged sharply, with some choosing to chase the musical spotlight that defined their father, while others retreated into privacy to heal. Let's break down where life took them, starting with number 4, Tracy Nelson. Born in 1963, she holds the distinction of being Ricky's firstborn and his only daughter. To say she was born into the business is an understatement. Tracy was bona fide showbiz aristocracy from her very first breath. With a mother who was both a talented painter and actress, and a father who was a rock and roll icon, it was practically destiny that Tracy would catch the performance bug at a tender age. She wasted no time starting her resume, making her big screen debut at just 4 years old, alongside legends like Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda in the beloved comedy Yours, Mine, and Ours. As she matured into her teenage years, Tracy transitioned seamlessly into television, securing steady work and proving she had the chops to back up her famous name. Her big break arrived in 1982 when she starred opposite a young Sarah Jessica Parker in the cult classic sitcom Square Pegs, playing a deliciously snobby valley girl that audiences loved to hate. Yet, while her professional star was rising, her personal world was collapsing. She endured her parents' messy divorce at 19, and just 3 years later, at 22, she had to bury her father after that nightmare plane crash. The immense emotional pressure and grief began to manifest physically, taking a severe toll on her health. In 1987, only a month after walking down the aisle with actor William "Billy" Moses, 23-year-old Tracy received a terrifying diagnosis. Doctors discovered a tumor the size of a grapefruit growing in her chest. It was identified as Hodgkin's lymphoma, a serious form of cancer, and by the time they found it, The disease had already advanced aggressively to stage 2. Tracy later shared a spine-chilling story about the diagnosis, revealing that she had a vivid dream where her late father called her on the phone to tell her, "I know you miss me, but it is not your time to die yet." In the dream, he was adamant, urging her with a ghostly warning that she needed to see a doctor immediately. That supernatural intervention pushed her to get checked out, a decision that likely saved her life, though she still had to endure a hellish battle to survive. Her treatment was brutal, involving a marathon 7-hour surgery to excise parts of her liver and lymph nodes, followed by punishing chemotherapy sessions that withered her frame down to a fragile 87 pounds. Looking back, she confessed that she believed the cancer was partly triggered by the overwhelming trauma she had absorbed over the years. The combination of grieving her father's sudden death and witnessing the vicious legal war between her mother and uncle over Sam had created a toxic cocktail of stress in her body. Against the odds, she achieved remission within 6 months, and remarkably, she refused to let the disease derail her career, continuing to work through the pain. She famously donned a habit to play the clever Sister Stephanie Steve Oskowski in Father Dowling Mysteries, literally jumping between chemotherapy appointments and the film set to shoot her scenes. But defeating Hodgkin's lymphoma in the late 80s was only the first round. Life had more medical hurdles in store for her. Unbelievably, she would go on to face down the terrifying specter of cancer 2 more times in the decades that followed. She was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in 2005 and then breast cancer in 2010, conquering the latter only after undergoing a double mastectomy, cementing her status as an ultimate survivor. Turning her pain into purpose, she became a vocal advocate for cancer research, winning awards for her activism, while simultaneously finding her greatest joy in raising her own children. During her marriage to Billy Moses, she welcomed her daughter Remington into the world in 1992. Although that marriage ended in divorce in 1997, Tracy expanded her family again in 2001, having a son named Elijah with her then-partner, director Chris Clark. Now in her early 60s, Tracy Nelson stands as a beacon of resilience and positivity, having outlived the tragedies that plagued her earlier years. Her work ethic never wavered. She has remained a constant presence on screen, with roles in massive hits like Melrose Place and Seinfeld, and she even graced Broadway, playing the tough-talking Rizzo in Grease. Beyond the fame, she has fully embraced her identity as a warrior who beat the odds and as the proud guardian of the Nelson family history. Moving on to number 3, we have the dynamic duo, Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, the identical twin sons born to Ricky and Kristen in 1967. Anyone who lived through the early 1990s will instantly recognize these long-haired blonde heartthrobs who absolutely dominated the pop rock charts and covered every teen magazine in existence. However, their ascent to rock god status and the reality of their lives after the applause faded was far more complicated and difficult than their polished music videos ever suggested. From the moment they took their first breaths, Matthew and Gunnar were completely submerged in a world of melody, practically growing up inside the Nelson family recording studio while their father jammed with legendary friends. They love to tell the story about a scruffy character they assumed was just a homeless drifter crashing on their couch, only to realize later that the disheveled guest was actually the icon Bob Dylan. When the walls of their parents' marriage began to crumble, music transformed into a vital sanctuary for the twins, shielding them from the chaos. By the tender age of 11, instead of just playing with toys, they were penning lyrics and cutting demos, using their creative output to drown out the noise of their mother and father's bitter, high-profile divorce. Fast forward to 1985. The boys were 18, and the atmosphere with their mother, Kristen, had become so incredibly toxic that they packed their bags and moved in with their dad, Ricky, hoping for a clean slate. In a cruel twist of fate, that new beginning was shattered almost immediately. Just a few months after they reunited, Ricky Nelson lost his life in a tragic plane crash on New Year's Eve. The devastation for Matthew and Gunnar was absolute. They had barely had time to rebuild the bond with their father before he was ripped away from them in a single, heart-wrenching instant. Rather than letting the sorrow destroy them, the twins channeled every ounce of their grief into their art. And a few years later, they launched a rock band that carried their surname, Nelson. Their debut record, titled After the Rain, wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a deliberate and poignant nod to surviving the emotional hurricanes that had battered their family history. Then came 1990, the year Matthew and Gunnar etched their names into the music history books forever. Their smash hit, Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection, rocketed straight to the #1 spot on the Billboard charts, cementing their status as the first and only twin brothers to ever achieve a chart-topping single. Seemingly overnight, the Nelson boys were absolutely ubiquitous, dominating the cultural landscape. You couldn't turn on a television without seeing them on MTV, or walk past a newsstand without seeing their faces on magazine covers, while airports became mob scenes of screaming fans, mirroring the mania their father faced decades prior. With their cascading manes of blonde hair and chiseled features, they became the ultimate pop metal heartthrobs, with the brothers even joking that they were just two long-haired guys who looked like attractive Swedish women. Looking back, Matthew has often laughed about their excessive glam aesthetic during the peak of the MTV era. The After the Rain album went double platinum, selling millions of copies. And for a fleeting moment, Matthew and Gunnar felt untouchable. But that whirlwind of superstardom was destined to be short-lived. As the early 90s rolled in, the musical landscape shifted beneath their feet almost instantaneously. MTV abruptly turned its back on hair bands to embrace the raw, gritty grunge sounds of Nirvana and Pearl Jam. And just like that, the Nelson twins went from selling out arenas to being yesterday's news. As Matthew described it, they went from heroes to pariahs overnight. The mainstream audience moved on to the next big thing, and their popularity plummeted by the mid-90s. Adding salt to the wound, the public cynicism was at an all-time high, with people assuming the brothers had an easy ride solely because of their famous last name. Vicious rumors circulated that they were just spoiled trust fund babies who never had to lift a finger to achieve their fame. The truth, however, was starkly different. As Gunnar and Matthew revealed, by the time their first record dropped, they had a grand total of $16 to their names and were literally living out of their car, scraping by on nothing. There was absolutely no golden parachute or safety net provided by their late father's fortune to catch them. By that time, Ricky's estate was a tangled legal mess and surprisingly modest, meaning the twins truly built their empire from the ground up with zero handouts. Although their time at the very top of the charts was brief, Matthew and Gunnar never lost their passion for creating music. They kept the dream alive, recording albums throughout the 1990s and 2000s, touring relentlessly anywhere fans would listen, from intimate clubs to cruise ship decks. Through every peak and valley of their tumultuous career, the bond between the brothers remained unshakable. They have often stated that their brotherhood was the anchor that kept them afloat when the industry turned cold. And eventually, both found peace in their personal lives as well. Matthew married and built a family, honoring his heritage by naming his son AZ after Grandpa AZ Nelson, while Gunnar also settled down and found domestic happiness in recent years. Their grandmother, the beloved Harriet Nelson, was fortunate enough to witness their meteoric rise before she passed away in 1994. Always calling the twins her absolute pride and joy. Now, navigating their mid-50s, Matthew and Gunnar Nelson are still rocking stages. But their mission has evolved into preserving their father's legendary legacy. The twins created a highly successful touring production titled Ricky Nelson Remembered. It is an immersive multimedia concert experience where they belt out Ricky's greatest hits, share intimate backstage stories, and screen rare home movies of their dad. This show serves as a bridge, allowing them to reconnect with their father's original fan base while introducing his timeless sound to a whole new generation. But now, let's talk about number 2, Sam Nelson. Born in 1974, Sam is the youngest of Ricky and Kristen's 4 children, and his early years were arguably the most chaotic of the entire Nelson clan. He was barely out of kindergarten when his parents' relationship exploded into a nasty public split. As a small child, Sam was helpless, caught squarely in the crossfire of their bitter and relentless custody battles. The courtroom was filled with ugly accusations of reckless spending, negligence, and drug abuse, forcing 6-year-old Sam to watch his family rip itself apart. The situation deteriorated to such a dangerous level that Sam was eventually removed from the home and sent to live with his maternal grandparents, football legend Tom Harmon and actress Elise Knox, just to ensure his safety. Try to imagine the trauma of being 6 years old and effectively taken away from both your mother and father. That was Sam's heartbreaking reality. Following Ricky's sudden death in late 1985, young Sam found himself the prize in a new, intense tug-of-war. This time, the battle lines were drawn between his mother, Chris, who was battling severe addiction demons, and his uncle, Mark Harmon, who was genuinely terrified for the boy's well-being. In 1987, Mark Harmon and his wife, actress Pam Dauber, took the drastic step of going to court to fight for custody of Sam, alleging that his sister Chris was unfit to raise him. The ensuing scandal was tabloid gold, pitting brother against sister within the famous Harmon family and dominating the headlines. Faced with losing her son, Chris entered rehab to confront her substance abuse issues and fought tooth and nail to keep custody of Sam. Eventually, the judge handed custody back to Chris, but it came with strict strings attached, mandatory family therapy for everyone, and guaranteed visitation rights for Mark and Pam. That bitter legal war left emotional wounds that never truly healed. Chris later admitted her family held a grudge because she wasn't the flawless daughter they wanted, and the custody battle effectively shattered the Harmon family bond forever. You don't need a degree in psychology to see just how damaging this toxic environment was for young Sam. Against all odds, Sam Nelson managed to survive his tumultuous childhood, blossoming into a driven and artistic man despite the chaos. Maybe it was inevitable with his genetics, seeing as his dad and older brothers were musicians. But Sam chased his own sonic dreams, completely on his own terms. By the early 2000s, he was fronting an alternative rock outfit with a quirky name, H is Orange. But that title wasn't just random. It held a deep personal significance for him. Turns out, Sam has synesthesia, a neurological condition he's had since he was a toddler. His brain crosses wires between text and color, so whenever he sees the letter H, it appears vividly orange in his mind. He adopted H is Orange as a metaphor for his worldview, symbolizing the importance of seeing life through a fresh, unique lens. Based out of Los Angeles, the band managed to make a real splash in the underground indie rock circuit. They gained a reputation for high-energy live performances and a slick, modern sound. In 2004, they dropped the album Don't Trust the Easy, which was so good, it even scored an Album of the Year nomination from a major music mag. 5 years later, in 2009, the band dropped a follow-up record called Thrill of Escape, and one of its singles even crossed over into gaming culture as a downloadable track for the smash hit Guitar Hero. Even though H is Orange never hit the stratospheric fame of his brother's band Nelson, Sam went on record saying he was totally fine with that. He preferred creating art in the shadows rather than burning out in the spotlight. As time marched on, Sam gradually stepped away from the microphone to focus on the business side of the entertainment world. By the time he reached his late 30s, reports surfaced that he was working as a music executive, using his experience to guide new artists through the treacherous waters of the industry. But honestly, Sam's biggest labor of love has been his dedication to saving the Nelson family history from being forgotten. In recent years, he took charge of a massive project to digitally restore the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, the legendary sitcom that turned his grandparents into household names back in the 1950s. Sam didn't just talk about it. He launched a full-scale campaign, including a crowdfunding drive on Kickstarter to fund the remastering process. His mission was to polish up the entire run of Ozzie and Harriet, once America's longest-running sitcom, so that a whole new generation could experience the show in crystal clear quality. That hard work finally paid off in 2022 when the first restored seasons hit DVD, a project lovingly curated by the grandson of Ozzie and Harriet himself. It speaks volumes about his character that, despite the trauma of his childhood, Sam is still so committed to preserving the brighter, happier chapters of his family's legacy. These days, now in his 50s, Sam Nelson mostly stays under the radar, living a quiet life away from the cameras. But hold on, the saga of Ricky Nelson's offspring isn't finished yet. We have to talk about child number 5, Eric Jude Crewe. If hearing number 5 surprises you, that's by design. For a long time, Eric was the family's best-kept secret. Born in February 1981, Eric was the son of Georgianne Crewe, a woman Ricky had a brief fling with while he was separated from his wife, Kristen. As you can guess, the whole situation was nothing short of a massive scandal back in the day. At first, Ricky flatly denied the boy was his flesh and blood. The truth did not officially surface until 1985, when a judge ordered a blood test that finally confirmed paternity. Once the results were in, Ricky stepped up and agreed to pay child support for his son, Eric. By that point, Ricky's marriage to Kristen was already history, and his fresh romance was splashing across headlines. Naturally, the bombshell of a secret son born out of wedlock just added more fuel to the family's public fire. Tragically, young Eric Jude was robbed of the opportunity to ever really know his father. He was just a toddler, barely 4 years old, when Ricky lost his life in that devastating plane crash. In stark contrast to his famous half-siblings, Eric was not raised in front of the cameras or within the high-pressure environment of the Nelson family's public legacy. Instead, he was brought up entirely by his mother, living a quiet life miles away from the Hollywood circus. Throughout the years, the Nelson clan has kept a tight lid on his story. They have shared almost no details regarding Eric, seemingly to respect his wish for privacy and to keep him safe from the prying eyes of the media.